Hello guys, welcome back to Fat City Vinyl. Doug coming at you once again with another in my series of reggae spotlight videos where I kind of try to talk a little bit about artists that may not be well known outside of the reggae collectors and fan circles. Today I'm going to be talking about an artist called Keith Hudson. Now he can be kind of a divisive figure in reggae. Some reggae fans don't particularly rate him. I've always been a fan, so this is a video I've wanted to do for a while. Now, Keith Hudson was born in 1946 in Kingston, Jamaica. He apprenticed as a dentist and worked in that trade originally in the late 1960s. Used the money from that to finance some of his first forays into the recording business as he grew restless with the dental work. He was a man of many nicknames. The Ghetto Dentist was one of them. He's apparently responsible for the red, gold, and green grill on the 70s DJ Big Youth. But he's somewhat of a man of mystery. The Black Morphologist is another of his nicknames, due to his ability to change styles and play around with his image. But his initial forays into recording, he was as a producer. He was recording other artists. First off, he traded with some other producers for some rhythm tracks that they had already recorded and used the money from that to finance his own sessions, working primarily with the Soul Syndicate band. He hit almost immediately with a song called Old Fashioned Way by his old school chum Ken Booth. With the success of that, he took the basic rhythm track and did a couple more versions of it as it proved popular. This was kind of a typical cost-saving measure for these small producers kind of trying to break into the business in the late 60s, early 70s. So he hit once again with the DJ U-Roy on a song called Dynamic Fashion Way, and then another DJ, Dennis Al Capone, on a song called Spanish Omega, and with just classic openings and intros and false starts on these tunes. You've got to check these out. So he had a particular run of success with the DJs. He had a habit of catching these guys at a very early stage of their career, and they invariably seemed to produce something a little bit special for him. And again, also working with singers of the caliber of Alton Ellis and Delroy Wilson, as I said before. However, he eventually grew restless with producing other artists and started focusing on himself as a vocalist, which that's kind of the line in the sand for a lot of reggae fans, as his vocal abilities are limited to say the least. But in typical Jamaican fashion, he made the best with what he had, and had a singular and unique kind of musical vision that I think redeems his music for me. So his first couple of LPs that came out under his first name, which I have, by the way, I have pretty much all of his music, I think, in one format or another. I don't have any original LPs. They're all extremely rare and expensive. Some have never been reissued. But he issued 2 LPs under his own name in 1972 called Class and Subject, and Furnace was another one of them. This is Furnace right here. You can see the beginnings of something of a theme or a concept in his work here. My brethren, my companion. And this is a reissue on the Sunspot label out of the UK. Now, these couple of early albums are something of a mixed bag of, which was not atypical for the early LPs at this time. Reggae was still very much a singles market. The LP was just beginning to come into its own as a format unto itself. So these couple of early LPs are a mix of instrumentals by the Soul Syndicate and a couple of his own vocals, and even the odd tune by other artists on there. So Class and Subject, he had a kind of a mix of kind of pop standards. There's a Burt Bacharach song on there, and love songs, and mixed with the rhythm tracks. Furnace, again, included a few more vocals by him, including the Soul Syndicate's version of Riot, which was one of the rhythm tracks that he would use again a couple of times. This early phase of his work was originally anthologized on a Trojan release called Studio Kinda Cloudy. This originally came out in 1988. It was compiled by Steve Barrow, reggae authority and founder of the Blood and Fire Records label. But by now, kind of the definitive version of his His early recordings is this one, called The Hudson Affair. This summarizes a lot of his work on 2 LPs and 2 CDs as well. This is the CD version. This came out on Trojan Records again. This was compiled by Dave Hendley, if I'm not mistaken. Let me just check here for 1 second. Yeah, Dave Hendley, who just passed away very recently, one of the great authorities on reggae music, also one of the most iconic photographers, close friend of many of the artists like King Tubby. Many of his photos have been used on various album and CD reissues over the years. They're very iconic. Passed away very recently, very sad. Moving on, as I said, Keith was a restless soul. He didn't like to stay in one groove for very long, so he had some success as a producer. One of his biggest successes was with the DJ Big Youth, then at a very early stage of his career. And the hit that established both Big Youth and really put Keith Hudson on the map as a producer was a song called Ace 90 Skank, or sometimes spelled S90 Skank, which the S90 was a popular brand of motorcycle in Kingston at the time, and it was the song was inspired by a near-fatal motorcycle crash. So to emphasize the point, Keith Hudson brought a motorcycle into the recording studio and had the engine revving as Big Youth uttered the immortal lines, "Don't you ride like lightning or you crash like thunder." That appeared on the Giant label, produced by Keith Hudson. Major hit for both of them. As I said, Keith Hudson, restless soul, soon lost interest in producing other artists. He was growing in confidence as an artist unto his own right, even though his vocals a bit of a challenge for him. He had sort of a raspy croak that was not particularly suited to crooning type songs, but would eventually prove a unique instrument to express the pain and suffering of his people, which were themes that grew in his work. His next LP was called Entering the Dragon. It's appeared in 1974. This is a reissue again by the Sunspot label out of the UK. And this finds him growing in confidence as a vocalist, very much focused on his vocals. Man from Shooter's Hill, Entering the Dragon, Like You Going to a Fair, Oh No, Not My Baby, and one of the more bitter tunes. Apparently he was going through a divorce at the time, Too Possessive and You Know It Baby. So, which was the thing with him, he would have this very idiosyncratic songwriting style, and even as he grew to include more universal themes in his work concerned with black consciousness, black history, black culture, he would express it in quite a personal and idiosyncratic way. So that was Entering the Dragon. Again, you can probably tell by the title, kind of influenced by the kung fu movies of the early 70s, blaxploitation movies. All of those were popular in Jamaica at the time. So following this, he relocated to the UK from 1974 to about 1976, and it was there that he produced what some consider one of his masterworks. That is called, the full title of this album is Flesh of My Skin, Blood of My Blood, The Black Breast Has Produced Her Best. It's more commonly referred to as just as Flesh of My Skin. This was only released in the UK. Did not get a release in Jamaica at the time. It appeared on the Mamba label, or Atra, I believe it also appeared on. This is a reissue, of course. And leads off with one of the darkest and moodiest instrumentals of his career called Hunting. The title track, and which is followed by a straight rhythm version of that song, and then the next song, Testing My Faith, are a bit more mellower, a bit more reflective, and the entire LP is concerned with the notion of black culture, black consciousness, of himself as a West Indian transplanted by force from Africa. It's very dark, very moody, almost gothic I would characterize his music as, which increasingly it became. One of his songs on here is called Darkest Night on a Wet Looking Road, which kind of very evocative and sums up the feeling of his music. Very late night kind of vibe. And actually the original liner notes of this the Flesh of My Skin album are quite a trip in terms of the fractured use of English. And some of the labels names that he would use for his recordings. Embitterments, which was apparently a dental term. Rebind. You have these very fractured, very almost violent terms for his labels that he would use. So the original liner notes to the Flesh of My Skin album read, Flesh of my skin, blood of my blood. His name, Keith Hudson. Born in Kingston, Jamaica. Hail by brethren as Mr. Rhythm. His hobby, history. He is like Brandish by his breed. Alway talk of brevity of time. And brother, stop your broil. Brute does not get me down, so let the brunt begin. 'Cause they are like that unto us. We are the bud of this land, so let us bunch. Those who hate us will bung bong. And in your sight we shall always be buxom. You shall be colsign. The word collectivism shows we can't own anything. We are the casuist, your conscience. Our celerity is needed. We must be like the cayenne. And not like celluloid causes you and I won the ivory of the land. Our strength is like the centillion, chafe. Yet still a people, we are champion colloquial. I have seen climactor Bailey, and our collusion will be commemorate of our own brother. Commute, let us be as the concourse always. I want to see a black congestion. Then we can conjoin and fight to the consummate. So you see this bizarre use of language, very fractured, very almost surreal, almost nightmarish, which is much of the quality of his work as he grew into his own as an artist. He also released in the UK one of the very early dub albums. It was reissued by Blood and Fire, again by Steve Barrow, who compiled that studio kind of cloudy one. Pick a Dub. This was one of the very early releases on Blood and Fire Records. Number 3, I believe. Only have this on CD, unfortunately. This was one of the very earliest dub albums. It was released in the UK. It was also one of the first that was really conceived as dub, with echo and reverb and bits of vocal snatches phased in. The original release just had a very simple, plain drawing of a dread smoking a spliff under a palm tree. Following that, he released another album called Torch of Freedom, which I have right here. This is a reissue on the Hot Milk label, also out of the UK, green vinyl. It's from 2013. Something of a more personal album, you would say. Don't let the teardrops fool you. Don't look at me so. Teardrops, like I'm dying. Again, the sense of pain in here. Lost all sense of direction, the opening track. Again, the sense of this pain, almost violence, I would say, in his work. Following that, he relocated to New York City. Was soon signed to Virgin Records. Virgin was in a race with Island Records at the time, which was having much success with Bob Marley and the Wailers and various other artists on their roster. Virgin was keen to compete. They were signing a lot of, going to Jamaica, signing a lot of reggae artists. Keith Hudson got signed. Again, of course, they were kind of hoping for the next Bob Marley. It was not to be. Keith would not be confined into any kind of role or expectations of what was what his music was or what it was to be. Virgin put a bunch of money into his recordings. What was turned into them was an album called Too Expensive. There's him on the front, looking very dapper and looking a little more street down here. Keith Hudson was a guy who throughout his life had some associations with some of the more unscrupulous side of things, I guess you would say. He was a guy who apparently liked to dress flashy, liked big cars. He definitely had some associations with enforcer-type people and that kind of thing. Too Expensive was a colossal flop. The title track has been the butt of jokes ever since. He expanded his sound to include not only reggae, but funk and soul. There's one track on here called Civilization, which is pretty much pure funk. A lot of reggae fans cannot stand this album. I heard it referred to as unlistenable online not too long ago. I listened to this again today to prep for this video, and I don't mind this album at all. I never have. I think it's not one of his best, but it is pretty decent. Smoking introduced me, some decent stuff on there. But the album tanked. It did not make any. The Virgin lost a lot of money on it. He was dropped from his contract. Following this, he entered into a period of regrouping, reassessing his career. Ended up putting out a dub album in advance of his next vocal album, which was called Brand. This was reissued, I believe, in the 90s on the Pressure Sounds label. Now, Brand contained the rhythm tracks for his next album, which most would consider his masterpiece. It is called Rasta Communication. This appeared in 1978, I want to say. This is also out on a deluxe CD edition with 2 discs, 1 disc of the dub versions. Now, this is definitely his 1979 on this one, sorry. Grell 5, so only the 5th LP on the iconic Green Sleeves label out of the UK. This is a reissue. First words on this album are, "Talk to me, I'm your brethren. There is a lot more for us to learn about reggae." This is reggae. This is Reggae King Saul. King Saul, whose name checked in that song, was another kind of street bad man that he knew in the UK. He had these sort of connections. And this album was completely concerned with the notion of Rastafarian identity. Rasta Country is another great one on there. I broke the comb. The comb as in he was not combing his hair and letting it grow into dreadlocks as an expression of his African identity. So that is pretty much the entire theme of this album, which is a brilliant one. Definitely an essential and instant classic. Following this, he continued to record in the UK, or the US rather. Did albums like Playing It Cool and Playing It Right, from one extreme to another. A lot of these albums were pressed in very small quantities, got sort of an indifferent response at the time. Steaming Jungle came in 1982. In 1984, he ran into Aston Barrett from Bob Marley's Wailers band, who had actually played on his Pick a Dub dub album from a few years before. They reconnected, got the idea to work together at Tuff Gong Studios in Jamaica. Sessions were in progress for that when Keith developed severe stomach pains. He returned to New York. He was diagnosed with lung cancer. Despite treatment, unfortunately, he passed away in 1984. And nothing was ever heard of those sessions again until last year, when the VP label out of New York reissued his final recordings. And I picked up the CD. They reissued it as 2 LPs and also as a single CD containing it. It is Tuff Gong Encounter, which is 6 vocals recorded at Bob Marley's Tuff Gong studio with Bob Marley's Wailers band, Bob Marley having passed away a few years before. And then also the resulting dub versions included on 1 disc, which are remixed by Prince Jammy, the legendary producer who also worked on his Rasta Communication album. Now, as soon as I heard this, I bought the CD because it's out as a 2 LP version, one with the vocals, one with the dubs. As soon as I heard this, I thought, yeah, I'm going to want the LPs. So I did finally get those. Tuff Gong Encounter with the vocals and Jammy's Dub Encounter. And that's for my mind, this is an excellent LP, excellent final work from the man called Keith Hudson. They did have to do some slight remixing as due to damage in the tapes, which were kept safe by Keith Hudson's son in Miami for 30 years after his death. But to my ears, it's very subtle, very tastefully done, and a fitting testament to the Dark Prince of Reggae, he's sometimes called. It's another one of his nicknames. So that is my look at Keith Hudson. Oh, one more I'll show you. One final, as I said, he'd lost interest in producing other artists, but in the early 80s he did work with a DJ called Militant Berry, and which resulted in an album called Green Valley. I have the 12-inch of one of the singles from that on Manic Records, it's the original UK pressing. Pistol Boy, which was a song about Sex Pistol Sid Vicious. And the B-side is Green Valley. So that is my look at Keith Hudson, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Take care.